F1. F1. Who plays F1 in that position? In this video, we're going to look at a game between Christopher Yoo and Magnus Carlsen. Don't know who Christopher Yoo is. Christopher Yoo was in some drama recently in which he got beat by Fabiano at a chess tournament and he ended up smacking a videographer lady in the back of the head. Kind of bonkers stuff. So here's a game between Magnus and Christopher Yoo. This game happened a few years ago. Christopher Yoo is white and Magnus is black. We're going to watch it from Black's perspective because we love Magnus. Christopher Yoo plays e4 and Magnus responds with Sicilian. We go into an exchange variation in the center in which the pawns are exchanged and white recaptures with the knight. Magnus goes f6, bringing his knight out. This is all theory. It's all normal. It's happened a million times before. And c3 from white. Just establishing the center and trying to control the squares. That's kind of what this opening is about. Magnus plays g3, attempting to fianchetto his bishop. You know what I'm saying? And Christopher Yoo plays e2. At this stage of the game, Magnus points out that if he did play this move, it's a boring variation, according to Magnus. So instead, he plays e2. And Magnus says, is that a move? Because that's how Magnus talks. Magnus fianchettos his bishop. White goes g5, just developing his bishop. Magnus develops his knight. Maybe he's looking for a trade in the center. Yoo then castles long. Normally when someone castles long in chess, it intends an attacking approach to the game. So, excitement. Magnus goes a5 with his queen. I kind of like this move from Magnus because it attacks the bishop and maybe creates some light pressure on this because we've got two attackers. Yoo plays b5, offering the queen exchange because it's the best move and he's a top grandmaster, so he's going to be making these moves. Actually, at this stage, he's quite young. And he's not a grandmaster, he's an IM. But Magnus does point out at the start of the game that this guy's got the potential to be a grandmaster, dude. Magnus exchanges the queens, and white recaptures. That's actually kind of a mistake, because the best move was to recapture with this knight here. Reason is that after he recaptures with the bishop, Magnus can play this move, in which he does. This is how the game is played. And then this bishop's kind of a bit pointless being there. He's just going to get kicked away, and he's going to have to go. But surprisingly, in this position, you just gives up his bishop pair. And Magnus recaptures with a pawn, because if he recaptured with his bishop, there's no need to give away the bishop. So he recaptures with his pawn, and that also allows the rook to come to the b file at one point. Maybe. We'll see. White plays e1, just attacking the king on the long diagonal, right? I mean, he hasn't even castled yet, Magnus, so it's kind of a good idea. And instead of castling here, Magnus plays h6. Just threatening to maybe push the bishop away. See ya. Bishop goes back. He maybe could have taken, but that kind of just gives Magnus the bishop pair, and you don't really want to be giving Maggie Carlsen the bishop pair in an endgame, because 9 out of 10 times, I know it looks like a drawn position, but Magnus is going to win this, because he's the greatest endgame player of all time. So Wu goes back. Magnus pushes the pawn to g5, and Wu goes back again. So Magnus's plan kind of worked. Magnus really doesn't like this bishop, and he really wants the bishop pair, so he puts his knight on h5, attempting to attack this bishop, take it off, and have the supreme pair. I mean, I know the bishop pair is known as like the best pair, and at the higher level, of course, but to me and you, we would rather the knight pair, wouldn't we? Come on. Come on, you know we would. The knight can forkity forkerson, bruv. Now Yoo plays a kind of bonkers move. He plays e5, which allows Magnus to then recapture the bishop. First of all, giving him the bishop pair, so he's got the stronger pair. And then what's the next move here? I'm going to bet that the next move that is played is not a move that you would think would be played in this position. This is why these guys are super high level for the in-betweener moves. d6. Look at that. That's a nice move. Because if Magnus just plays like a nothing, he's not going to play that. But if he just played a nothing move, for example, this is inbound. Getting a bit juicy. King has to move out the way and then he can recapture. And now this is winning for white. So Magnus doesn't play a stupid move in this position. He plays an even more bonkers move. And he takes the knight there. Because now this doesn't give much of an advantage. Because when he goes to the side and captures, he's still got this piece. And he can attack this. That's kind of just like crazy, isn't it? The in-betweener moves are what separate us from the good players. And when I say us, you may be above 2,000, but the majority of people are not. The average rating is between 14 and 15. I told you. Anyway, Magnus takes, with all of this stuff hanging, takes the bishop. And that's a mistake, because now Magnus can jump back, and he's attacking both the rook and this pawn. Crikey. This is kind of bonkers, isn't it? I mean, anyone in this position here would have... I mean, you would have played that move, don't you? You would have played that move. He's like, no, I wouldn't have. I probably would have played that move. Retreats the rook just one square up so he doesn't get taken. And now Magnus can't take this because this can be taken, and it can't be taken because of the pin. So Magnus plays another what a clean move. e6 with the bishop. That's such a nice move because now If he pushes, he can just take. If he doesn't do anything with this and he plays like a move like this, then he can take this pawn, and now he can take because it's okay. So Yoo takes the pawn, otherwise he's about to lose the pawn, and then Magnus just recaptures. Now Black's position is looking even stronger. He's got the diagonals, he's got these two pawns on this side of the board. The knight's potentially jumping around. Yoo jumps his knight to e4, and Magnus just goes for the rook trade. Key tip, when you're up material, it's good to trade off material. So right now, Magnus is up an entire piece. So he's trying to trade off because then in the endgame, it will be one piece against a bunch of pawns. So it's better for him. Yoo doesn't accept the rook trade, and he goes after this pawn here. Magnus protects the pawn with c8, and then Yoo plays c5 with his knight, which is kind of a nice move because it's getting this, maybe there's some jumps with this at some point. Magnus gets out of the pin, f6 with his king, and then Yoo decides it's time for an attack. His king side, he's got 3 pawns here doing nothing, so he decides to launch them and get them into action. It's about time, to be fair, because he doesn't really have anything on the board. He's got a rook facing a bishop that's protected. He's got a rook facing a pawn and his own piece, and that's already, you know what I mean. Magnus plays d5 with his bishop, just trying to snipe some pawns, maybe. Yoo protects the pawn, and Magnus jumps his knight. Just further pawn shopping. He can't push this because if he takes, then, I mean, he's not going to take and lose his rook, is he? So Yoo plays rook up just to protect that pawn. Logical move. Magnus once again goes for the rook trade, just trying to liquidate all the pieces. Yoo avoids the trade, which is smart. And then Magnus hits him with a check. King's only move at this stage is to go there. That's the only move that the king can do. And then here, Magnus is contemplating. He thinks for a little while. This is why it's such a time scramble, because Magnus in this game is a 3-minute game, unrated, blitz. Magnus is thinking quite a lot in this game. At this stage in the game, Yoo has about 2 minutes left, and Magnus has about 1 minute and 30 seconds. So he's in a losing position, Yoo, but Magnus has less time, so he's attempting to flag him. So he's moving super quick. Let's see what happens. So Magnus is contemplating either b1 or h1. Ultimately, he goes with h1, but the best move was actually just to come back. And at this point, now it's time to push the pawn. Just a little tip here. At the lower level, guys, before I was level 1000, I used to always think that exchanging these 2 pieces for 1 rook was a good idea. And I feel like a lot of people do have that thought process. If you do, stop doing that. Because as soon as I stopped doing that, I started getting better. Don't ever exchange 2 minor pieces for 1 rook and a pawn. It's not worth it. Although the rook is worth more points, these minor pieces in the right position could be worth more than the rook. Magnus retreats his knight to f5. Maybe there's some more jumps coming on. Yoo goes d3, just centralizing his rook. He doesn't really have many moves that he can make at this point, so he's just trying to get his rooks in better positions. Magnus goes e8, just grabbed an open file. Another tip, it's always good to grab the open files. Whenever you see a file open, just put your rook on that file and just see what happens. If Yoo plays like a nothing move now, then Magnus has got this sort of stuff happening, and then the back rank is looking kind of dangerous. Yoo plays b3, just solidifying the pawns and maybe creating some sort of attack with this pawn at one point. Magnus then plays a great move, which is a1. Such a nice move, because now this doesn't work because he loses his rook. King can't go anywhere on that file because he put his rook here and he loses his rook. That's so nice. So Yoo obviously sees this and moves his king into a better position. See, Magnus offers the rook trade again, just trying to simplify down. And Yoo kind of has no choice but to trade off the rook, so he trades on his own terms. So first he moves his king to the side, and then Magnus takes and he recaptures. Important here, he doesn't recapture with the pawn, because if he does, this is an isolated pawn. Look at this weakness, and then maybe this is weak at one point. So he takes back with the knight, because now the pawns are together still. And now he's got triple pawns, and he just has to try and get rid of these, and then maybe he's got some sort of chances. Magnus goes d4 with his knight, just maybe threatening to put some pressure on this pawn, maybe this pawn. This pawn needs a bit of protection, maybe. So Yoo pushes his pawn. Magnus then stops the attack by g4 in it with his pawn. Just clamping it down, he can't push this pawn anymore. But he has given this little square for his knight, in which Christopher Yoo quickly jumps into, and that's kind of a nice knight. There's no getting rid of that one. Magnus brings his king up to maybe go for some sort of attack like this, and also to protect this pawn. Yoo brings his king over to c5 to attack Magnus's knight, which is just chilling there at the moment, and Magnus goes forward with the knight. The best move here was actually d1, just solidifying the whole position and everything's cool. But Magnus goes forward because in the endgame, you kind of want to keep going forward, but Magnus doesn't spot that you can actually take this pawn here. So Yoo takes the pawn, Magnus is like, I didn't see that one. Magnus recaptures and king recaptures. And now look at this position. White has 3 pawns on this side of the board. Black has another piece, so Black's technically winning, but these pawns, if Magnus doesn't play it really well, then it could easily turn around this game. So here we go. Magnus h1, trying to attack this pawn. Yoo plays d5, which is a mistake. Bear in mind that at this stage in the game, Magnus has about 30 seconds left, and Yoo has over a minute. He's trying to flag him, but he's going to be making a mistake. Magnus takes on H2, going for the rook trade once again, and Yoo surprisingly trades off, and it's the best move, which is crazy because these, after the trade, these 3 pawns, unless Magnus plays this endgame perfectly, these 3 pawns, one of them is going to become a queen, surely, right? And now just sit back and just watch this absolute mastery. Magnus Carlsen endgames. Ain't nobody stopping this dude. I've got toothpaste all over my t-shirt. Pawn pushes up. F1. F1. Who plays F1 in that position? F1. Pawn goes. G3. Pawn goes again. How are you stopping this pawn? This is how. King F6. King F6. Such a nice move. Giving the square to the knight. Pawn goes again. F5. And now, if he promotes to a queen, he gets forked. That's punk, isn't it? What? Crazy. Magnus literally played this perfectly. So Yoo sees this, and he actually promotes to a knight instead. And then Magnus plays the same idea and trades off. Best move in this position was just to push this other pawn and then just keep advancing the pawns. When Yoo plays this move, he knows that he's going to get forked regardless, so he might as well delay it a second by taking back and then causing Magnus to move his king once more. It's all these little tactics that win you these games in the time scrambles. So now the king jumps back. Basically, the king can't come down at all. If the king comes down, then the pawns are advancing. Magnus plays F5, just such a nice move, because if he takes, obviously, he's going to get a queen. King goes up. Magnus clamps this position down, because now if he pushes, this isn't fast enough to get through. King goes back, and here Yoo has very few moves. He just shuffles the king around a little bit. Magnus pushes the pawn, and Magnus just goes pawn hunting. Yoo can't really do anything but accept that just all of his pawns are about to be taken. And here Magnus has about 10 seconds left, and Yoo has about 15, 20 seconds. So he's got kind of a big time advantage. All he needs to do is just spam his king around, and maybe he's got a chance at flagging Magnus. But Magnus just has so many pawns. So Yoo comes down and tries to sneak a pawn. Magnus spots it, though, and advances his pawn. And now he's got a queen coming onto the board. But then, slowly but surely, so does white. And also, white's queen is coming with a check. It's a race. Black queen's first, but white queen's with a check. Oh my goodness. The king can either jump out the way or block with the queen. Magnus chooses to block with the queen. Another check. Block. Another check. Slide to the side. And then there's no more checks. What the hell is he going to do? There's literally like 2 seconds on the clock for Magnus. And for Yoo, there's like 4 seconds. Yoo goes to the side because he doesn't really have any moves. Check. King's only move. Check. King's only move. Takes. This is actually a mistake. Because here, there's actually a mate in 2. Can you spot the mate in 2? I'm sure you can. Where's the mate in 2? Boom. Boom. But that doesn't happen because Magnus has like 0.1 seconds left on the clock or something ridiculous like that. So he trades off. This is also on a website that's not chess.com. So every time you make a move, it doesn't take away 0.1 seconds. So if you have like 0.1 seconds left, you can pre-move pretty much every single move. That's kind of what Magnus does in this situation. C6 check. F8. King's coming in. King can't get off these ranks. Queen goes down. King goes back. King comes in. He literally has his mate in 2. Boom. And at this stage, here, Yoo gets flagged. Magnus actually wins on time. It's just a mate in 1. Like, that's mate. But the game ends right here on time. Oh, crikey. I'm exhausted. Looking at the accuracy for that game, Magnus played 92.9% and Yoo played 85.5%. This is a 3-minute blitz game. No increment. Such a good game. And that's kind of the video, guys. Have a good day. Drop a like and see you later. Bye.